All right, so now we're getting to the really fun stuff where we are really just very close to being able to animate this character. But like I said before, we want to make sure we have controllers for all of the joints that we want to move so that we're not actually bending the joint itself and the joint stays at a zero coordinate system. We can go ahead and close our weight manager at this point so that we don't have to see those weights anymore. So what we use for controllers are usually nulls and splines, and those splines can be used, in any kind of. You can make any shape you want that will become a controller that you can select things with. So let's get started. Let's just start at the waist. And what I like to do is I like to go under my main menu here for polygon primitives and just shift-click null anytime I want to have a null wherever I am. This is, again, a good chance to bring up that reset PSR into our. This is going to zero out the position, scale, and rotation of whatever we have selected to whatever its parent is. So right now it's this far away from the parent, but if we click that reset PSR, it brings it to right there. So on this object, we can change the display to be a whatever we want. I'm going to make it an octagon. We'll increase that radius. It's facing the camera, but we want it to actually face the, let's see, I want to say the XZ, yes. So this is a good null controller that we can use to control the entire waist. So let's just call it waist control. So just like this waist control that we made, we're going to make a few more controls down here, but instead of using nulls, I'm going to use some splines. So let's start with a circle. I don't have this parented to the hip. We'll use that PSR 0, and I'm going to make sure that it's facing the direction that we want. So we'll make it, the plane is going to be XZ, and we'll reduce this radius down. And we can change this color. We'll use it, we'll make like an orange for this left leg. It's really up to you how you want to color these, but I'm just going to keep it like this. And I do want to make these circles editable, because just in case we want to adjust the anchor point, it needs to be exactly what the anchor point of each of these joints is, and that's because when we want to add constraints to these joints so that they follow these nulls or these splines, they don't get crazy when we apply those constraints. So they have to be exactly the same position and rotation and size and all that. So I'm going to call this the left hip. I'm going to do another one down here, another one at the heel, another one at the toe. And we'll rename these in a second, but I want to just zero them out. You can see how the heel is turned like this, and so that's one that we're going to have to adjust here. Let's just change the size of this one. This knee can be smaller. The heel and the left toe. Okay, that one's fine. Let's make sure the heel is appropriately positioned. We're going to change the coordinates here. So I think what I want to do is I actually want to adjust the position of this one so that it's actually flat to the ground like this. And we'll move it up, put it in place where we actually want it. This thing is just distracting me, so I'm just going to move it down to here. But this is the heel. This is where I actually want the heel controller to be. And so with it at these coordinates, it's really not going to work to have this parented, this PSR constraint to this, because it'll move everything up. And so what I want to do is make sure that the axis is positioned right where that heel position is. So we'll go to the axis mode, go to the side view, make sure we have snapping on to axis snap. And then what we'll do is we'll drag this down. It will snap to the heel. That's where the axis is. But then down here with this axis mode on, we're going to change this rotation to 0 and hit apply. So now it still keeps that orientation for us to grab it, but the axis is where it's supposed to be on the heel. So we don't want to change the heel's rotation necessarily. It is something you can do using that technique I showed you earlier where you just turn the skin off. If we wanted to just change this actual rotation of this heel so that it's just facing like this, we can do that. If we turn the skin off and then we set the bind pose and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, we're just going to do it like this. This toe controller, we can make this maybe look a little different. So let's make an end side instead. Make that a parent or a child of the toe. PSR, zero it out. The object should be on the XZ plane. Shrink it down. Okay, that's good. Then we can change the color of this one. Try to make it that orange color again. I'm just eyeballing it. Okay, so now we have this, and we've got sort of a chain of controllers that aren't actually controlling anything, but they're more easily selectable, and that's the whole idea of creating these controllers. Is that it's a lot more difficult to go in and try to grab these joints and move them like that. So let's put these under their own chain, just like this. We're just going to parent them down, just like we did before. End side should be called left toe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add constraint tags to each of these. And so let's just start with the waist. It's under the character menu. If you right click on waist, you go down to the character tags, hit constraint, click PSR. This is a position, scale, rotation constraint where literally anything that happens to this controller will affect the waist. So that's what we want to do. We want to grab this waist control, put it in the target. Let's just test it out. I'm still on axis mode, but if I move this down, nothing happens if I actually grab the waist joint now, but if I grab the waist control, everything moves with it. That's what we want. Let's do the same thing down the line. I'm just going to change this hip, knee, and heel. If you just click and drag down, it's just going to make the waist it'll make the waist the control be the PSR constraint for all of these. So instead what I want to do is just add constraint tags to all of these without adding where those PSR constraints are going to go. We'll select all these at the same time, click PSR, and then for each of these we'll just grab what it needs to correspond to. So for the left hip, it'll be this left hip. The left knee should be the left knee. You'll know you're doing it right and that the orientations are correct if nothing gets popped out of place when you go down the line here. So on the heel, we want this one, and the toe, we want this one. Just test it out. Good. Great. Grand. Things looking good. So this is how we set up these PSR constraints to a rigged null and spline system that's outside of the joint chain. Now what I want to do is use this new chain to create IK rigs. And what I want to do is give it a little hint as to where I want the IK rig to go. So I actually want this bent back just a little bit, and this heel bent up just a little bit. So it's like that, and it's sitting on the floor. Okay, that's how I want this to go. From the hip to the heel, we can just either create an IK chain, which is under character commands, create IK chain. And what that'll do is it'll create the IK tag at the top, and it will create a null controller at the bottom. But in our case, we actually know what we want to make the control, and that's the heel. So let's just create the IK chain from here by going to character tags and grabbing an IK. And underneath that tag, it gives you an object where you want the end and the goal to be. The end is going to be this heel. And the goal is possibly something that we want to be different, but let me just try it with this. Yep, I think we want to add a goal. So this will be the left heel goal. Now when we pull that up, it brings the toe with it, which is good. And because we gave it that little bit of hinting as to where we wanted that knee to be bent, it's actually bending pretty much exactly the way that we want it to. It's an option, you can add what's called a pole vector to give that knee a little bit of a hint of where it needs to go. Well, that's interesting that you can grab that joint there. But that's right here under this menu. If you go to this pole vector, you can add a pole, and it will create that outside of the chain. Grabbed the wrong thing. There we go. And this will tell you which direction if you wanted the knee to bend out a little bit more, out to the side, you can do it this way. But I think I'm gonna, let's see what happens if I move this. Yeah, actually, there we go. So we have this and this heel right here, spline, and that's great. And in fact, I wanted that to be the heel goal, but instead what it's going to be is just the indicator for where the joint is. So what I want to do at this point is I do want to make a copy of this heel, Control, and we'll just call this the heel, left heel goal. And we're going to put this above it in the chain here, so it's outside of the hip to heel chain. And that's important for IK controls anyway. You want to have the controller be outside of the chain, the actual chain of the joints. So this joint will still exist, but it's only there to be someplace where the heel will look towards. So at this point, though, what we can do is go back into our IK chain, set the goal to be the left heel goal that we just set up. And it's right there, and it's still something we can easily grab, and we can move just like this. You can also rotate. Oh, so real quick what I need to do. So now that we have that left heel goal set up, we do want this left heel joint to follow the goal. And so we're going to set up a PSR constraint for that one as well. Create the constraint, make it a PSR constraint, and then we're going to grab that left heel goal. And so at this point now we can move this around, and it follows the rotation as well. And that's exactly what we want. So that makes it a lot easier to do walk cycles, run cycles. You can move things like this. I'm not going to get into toe roll as much, because there are ways that you can set these up so that there's a controller in the front and in the back that allows you to lift the heel by just moving this. But I've been able to do a lot of character animation using just left heels with the toe, making sure that there's a toe bone that's attached to that heel, so that every time you move the heel, which right now it's on a PSR constraint to the goal, but every time you move this, you're able to move that toe with it. And then, if you need to, you can bend the toe like this. So it's a little bit of extra animation. One last thing we're going to cover is a pole vector, and that's something that is also included inside of this IK controller. If you wanted to, you can add a pole. Right now it's kind of cool that the leg is moving exactly, it's bending exactly the way that we want it to. It's not bending in any weird directions. But if it was something where you wanted to make sure that you wanted to control the knees direction, you can add a pole vector, and that's right here inside of this IK tag. You can add a pole, and it creates the hip pole, which is parented right now to, looks like the waist. But really here it is, and if you move it around, you can see how it sort of changes the direction of that knee. And that's really helpful and handy if you are looking to do that. But I always want to make sure that it's actually parented to the hip. So that way when the heel moves, that pole moves with it. And it makes it a lot easier to change direction later. And instead of having this sitting out here, it just stays where it is if this heel goes up here, and then the knee has to sort of bend back down to face the hip pole. So make sure that's parented to the hip control. And this left heel goal will just drop back down to where it was. Oop, that's not it. what's happening. Don't know what's happening. All right, there we go. This is also a good time to maybe zero out and freeze out our actual coordinates. So I'm going to freeze all. I'm going to freeze these as well, so that now this will be the 0 point of this heel. Maybe I'll move it forward a little bit to match the other one. And then I'll zero it out.